Okay, we are getting our population of people in here. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to hit play on this little intro video while we let the rest of our audience file in, and then we will get to it. So cool. All right. No, don't play again. Go to the next slide. There we go. Welcome, everyone. We'll still have a few more trickling in while we go through some housekeeping items. First thing I'm going to say is that I'm having terrible internet connectivity issues due to a rolling storm in the area. So if I should get cut off here, Parker is going to run with the rest of the intros, which is handy because he will then jump into presenting with Victoria. So, and I do hear a ringing phone there. That's cool. Does everyone else hear a ringing phone?
Yep, I hear it too.
We're hearing it.
Awesome.
What
Okay.
are we calling? Is this a prank call?
I don't even know where it's coming from.
Greg Plank
Yes.
is not available. Record
Oh,
your
we must
message
have
at the
let someone
tone.
in
When you
via,
are finished, hang up.
We're
or
about
press
to leave a
pound for
really
more
long
options.
voicemail.
Yeah, we are. This will be good. This will be good. Okay, so again, today's technically speaking, I'll do my best to host if I don't get disconnected, but Victoria and Parker are going to be walking us through a very cool topic. We're going to try to get a little bit geeky today while showing off cool things going under the hood technologically of some of what's happening with the AI on board our bars. Going over to our next slide here. Now, if you have been to a webinar with us before, you get it. Just hang tight. If you haven't, here's how we like to do these. An webinar is essentially us doing a webinar, but trying to make it casual, right? So your mics are all muted, but for sure, if you want to unmute that thing, raise your hand. We will unmute you, ask a question at any point. We encourage you to turn on cameras if you are comfortable with that, because we're meaning for this to be more of a face-to-face conversational where it can be. So again, cameras on where you're comfortable, and throw your hand up. We will unmute you. If you just want to ask a question in chat, though, you can certainly do that. There's also the Q&A app that we'll keep an eye on for those questions as well. A couple of us will be watching that during this time, and if a question pops in, I will use that as an opportunity to interrupt, especially if Parker's the one speaking, because I like to do that. So we will, yeah, that's kind of the end rules. There's not a lot else to cover there. Just raise a hand in Teams. Most of you should be familiar with that. And then questions in chat and via audio. And of course, the giveaway, Speak to 75 and a PanaCast 20. We will be giving these away. The drawing is not taking place during the session, but we will use the attendance report afterwards to randomly draw a name, and we will then email you with the email that you registered at to let you know, hey, you're the lucky winner. Good stuff.
Josh,
and
what if
yeah.
I emailed with registered with a fake email, because I don't really like receiving spam, and so I like to check what's going on. Is that how will you get in touch with me then?
I would assume that that's a you thing for the most part, and you're not eligible anyway. But for those that may have done the same thing, I'm terribly sorry to hear that. You will have to have access to the email that you registered with. So
Make sure you use a real email.
Yes, real emails will be helpful in this instance for sure. Now, next month, I will say, we are doing the Halloween edition of Technically Speaking, and it's not going to be a random drawing. It's going to be a costume contest, and I will be wearing a costume, and I'm going to do my darndest to make sure that everyone else from Jabra is wearing one as well, but I will see how successful I am. But the best costume wearer in the audience next month will be winning the gear instead of us do a drawing. So the real bet is, am I going to be the only fool wearing a costume on next month's Technically Speaking, or will this be a little more fun? Hopefully you all will join in on the silliness. But anyway, let's move on over to the, sorry, too many clicks. The title for today's session is What Sort of Wizardry is Powering the PanaCast Experience? We're going to be diving into a good handful of our video modes across both the PanaCast 50 and the VBS, our Android bar, and not just demoing them and taking a look at them, but Victoria and Parker are also going to be talking about what's actually going on under the hood there. How are we making these algorithm decisions to choose what's happening in the room at an AI level? How are we making this more inclusive and collaborative through the special touches we put into these modes? That is the name of the game for today. Before I hand things over, I'm going to remind you all that the Technically Speaking page is jabra.com/technically speaking, which you can get to from that QR code. And I implore you to bookmark that page. I actually had a couple questions come up in the last couple of days of, hey, how do I get signed up for this? And how do I know when these things are coming up? Jabra.com/technically speaking, bookmark. You will never be out of sorts with what's coming up next. You'll be able to register for them all in advance, get them on your calendar. And Rhoda has dropped in a link in the chat to make it even more helpful. There should be no reason that anyone doesn't know what's coming up next. I'm going to skip over our questions slide here. We'll come back to questions toward the end. But again, please remember, questions throughout are welcome. Throw your hand up, drop them in chat, drop them in Q&A.
And Josh, we've got to let people know the sincerity factor is going to be a lot higher this session because I don't see Michael Tressler joined. So like sincerity, very high. Very high.
Very true. The sincerity meter should be off the charts this time. Exactly. But he will be able to go back and watch the recording. So I'll point out to him that he may want to do that now that you said that. But that's okay. That's it. This is my time to hand it over to Parker and Victoria to walk us through multi-stream, dynamic comp, and the rest of the Edge AI that brings these things to life.
Well, thanks, Josh. Appreciate the handoff. And I will go ahead and let Victoria introduce herself.
Hey, everyone. So great to be here, and thanks for including me in this. I am Victoria. I work at Jabra as our Senior Experience Product Manager, working specifically on video product experiences. So look forward to telling you more about all of the intelligence that goes behind what you are seeing right now.
Sweet. Love it. And many of you have seen me before. This is not my first webinar appearance. I don't think it's your first webinar appearance either. Yeah, we've both unwebinared in the past. So here we are doing it together. But my name is Parker Dunbar. I'm a solutions architect here at Jabra. I work on our video collaboration products. In my spare time, I also get balloon headsets made by very talented balloon artists. We encourage them through their ability to deliver, and they did deliver our great Evolve 2 balloons. But I'm going to have to get a new picture for this year. I think we're going to have to do another event of some kind. And I have 2 dogs and a wife at home. So lots to do outside of work too. We thought that we would start by defining some terms that you may have heard or seen in Jabra literature. But for this session and for this audience, we kind of wanted to deep dive on some of these specifics, just so that as we go through, show you some of these experiences, we'll all have that same frame of reference. So I'll let Victoria start off and then I'll jump back in.
Yeah, so first one is dynamic composition. So you'll hear us talk about this a lot. It is our umbrella term for intelligent framing, where Jabra takes what's happening in the video stream and breaks it down into either one video stream or multiple video streams, depending on what you choose, depending on what platform you're using, and that is then presented to you. So right now, what you're looking at for Parker and me is one stream. So we call that single stream dynamic composition. Parker is sitting across the table from me. And we are then just eliminating all of the empty space in the room, showing just Parker and me, just what's important in the room at this time. If there were more people in the room, which you'll see a little bit later, we'd adjust that. We could also do this in a multi-stream format. So instead of just doing all of this in one stream, we could just give Parker his own stream, myself my own stream, and you'd have a different view. So those are the 3 different dynamic composition, single stream and multi-stream terms. And I'll let Parker go into the BYOD and rooms terms.
So as you heard Victoria mention, these different experiences that the camera is producing are being consumed by the UC application. And so you may see some differences between what your Jabra device can do in a Teams meeting when you have a BYOD meeting, when you're just bringing your laptop or you're using one of those wireless BYOM devices. versus when you're in a Teams room or in a Zoom room. And the reason for that is that the software that is underlying those different UC experiences is different. And so we're able to work with our UC platform partners so that they can have more enhanced and more feature-rich experiences in those dedicated room spaces. So those multi-stream experiences that Victoria alluded to and that you're going to get to see later in this webinar, those are going to have some different requirements beyond what we can deliver in just any old BYOD meeting. But the idea and the ethos here is that we want to make sure that these types of equitable video modes are accessible, whether you're in a BYOD setup or you're in a room system. And so those room systems, we're using this as like a very umbrella term to talk about a Teams room or a Zoom room. And that means it could be Windows hardware, could be Android hardware. And so you're going to see an experience that uses our PanaCast 50, which is that USB peripheral device, with a Windows-based Teams room on Windows from Lenovo, and you're going to see an experience that uses our PanaCast 50 VBS, that Android bar, and an experience that's using Zoom rooms. So that's going to come later in this session. What do we miss, John?
Are these terms like all pulled straight from the Oxford English Dictionary?
They are.
Yeah. Okay.
I have submitted them. You know, there's like this isn't like Wikipedia where I can just go in and edit the article and then it's there, because I got my pocket approvers who are like ready to go. So, you know, next edition. Yeah. Okay. So we wanted to be able to give you kind of a primer on what you're going to see before you see it. And the only time we aren't going to live up to that is this time right here, because as Victoria mentioned, you've already been watching us from this dynamic composition. So you're seeing us through this Teams meeting on your laptop, or you might have joined from a room system if you've got a room system around. What we're using right now is just our PanaCast 50 USB peripheral connected via USB to my laptop here. And that's why if you notice, if you look in the lower left corner of our video feed here, you just see my name. You don't see Victoria's name, and that's because this is a BYOD session. So all the Teams client knows is that Parker Dunbar user account on this laptop has joined the meeting. And so even though you see the two of us, you just see that one name there. And that's happening just by nature of this being that client experience on a laptop. I'll pass to Victoria to talk a little bit about how we're deciding some of the framing decisions that are happening here, and she can give a little more context and color.
Yeah, and actually, if I could request to unshare so that the video is more prominent, that would be great.
Love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms, oh, sorry, Josh, were you?
Nope, I was just going to say, if you were going to keep that up, people can click on back and forth to make this a bigger view, but unsharing works as well. So
love it.
Cool. Yeah, so just to talk through some of how we're deciding what to show and how to show it. So our cameras are now seeing the whole room. And as you know, our cameras are 180-degree field of view. So it's looking at that whole video and seeing there's two people in the room and deciding to show those two people in a grid as you're seeing now. It's also taking into account where those people are sitting and how to place the person. So instead of me on one side and Parker on the other side, should it show it the other way around? What makes most sense as Parker and I are turning and looking at each other and having a conversation? So those are all conscious decisions that the camera is making in real time. Another thing that happens very often in a meeting room in real time is someone walks into a meeting room. So I'm gonna bring my handy friend here, Ron, into the meeting room. And you can see the camera very quickly adjust to him to show him as well. And if Parker brings in one more person into the meeting room here, we have, I don't know who he's gonna pick. I think it's Will Smith. So if Parker brings in Will Smith, the camera now adjusts and shows Will Smith too. So you can see how quickly that all happens. Again, all the cameras doing this all in real time, deciding who to place where. So now we showed you earlier Parker and me looking at each other and having a conversation. If Parker was to look at Will Smith, and if Will was able to look back at him and talk and wave, it would look like they are actually looking at each other and talking to each other. So we are very intentionally preserving what's happening in the room where people are seated in this video, so that for the people watching at home, it makes a lot more sense to them versus I'm just looking at the other side when really I'm talking to Parker. So hopefully that all makes sense. This is something we do across our different video modes, across products, in the hopes of delivering a good meeting experience.
And I think that's like really important to stop for a minute and just kind of sit on that, because in these different rooms, you have, a variable number of people in a small to medium sized meeting room, and trying to make sure that as much as possible, when people are looking at each other in the meeting, that they actually appear to be looking at each other and not just off into space. Sometimes I do look off into space during meetings, and I don't have the ability to just say, oh, no, I was actually looking at someone in the room. So having that continuity so that when you are joining the meeting remotely, you still feel like people are there, they're participating with one another, they're engaged, as much as we can be engaged with cardboard people. But it's nice to not have to have somebody who is hiding under the table for the first 15 minutes of the webinar, and then we permit them to pop up one at a time. As you saw too, the camera went from showing just Victoria and I to showing 3. We gave somebody a little bit more real estate, and we show 4 in these 4 equal size spaces. And this is probably, and I don't know, Victoria may be able to attest to this, this might be the only time that Victoria and I appear to be the same height. Because when you think about that, the people, the faces in the frame, we don't want to end up with somebody very low and somebody very high. It can be very disorienting. So we sort of normalize the facial position within a frame so that people appear to be the same size, which is very flattering. It also means there's nowhere you can sit in the room where you happen to look skinnier or happen to look larger. So, this is like the one camera that doesn't add 10 pounds. It's just really mercilessly committed to your size, regardless of where you are in the room.
Yeah. So maybe another thing to just add here before we switch to the next video mode that the PanaCast 50 has is right now there's 4 people in the room. What happens if a 5th person walks in? So in this particular mode, we show up to 4 people, the 4 most recent speakers in the meeting room. But what happens now if a 5th person comes in and starts speaking? Well, that 5th person would now replace the person who has spoken the most previously. So if Parker hadn't talked, Amy would now come in and replace Parker as she has now. So so that is what would happen. And that would happen even if there were 10 people in a room. So we would always show the 4 most recent speakers. And we always as well try to preserve the context of their location in the room as well.
Yeah, and there's a comment in the chat from Doc about the lighting on the faces of different people. It's a great call out. As you can see here, I just popped up. One of the things that's happening here is you have 2 people who have 3-dimensional faces, and you have 3 cardboards who have 2-dimensional faces. So it does create kind of a bit of visual difference, and we're shooting for those 3-dimensional people faces, but we also want to make sure that as you look at the different video feeds or as you look at the room, we have consistent color. While we could do a lot more adjustment, the more we adjust any one face, the more that Victoria would maybe look like she's in a different room because now her background white balance has changed. So it's a trade-off, absolutely, between how much you can do to normalize any one person or how much you can do for separate people in the room.
Great. I think we've covered this particular video mode. Josh or anyone else, anything we forgot to add in that you'd like to jump in with before we switch over to the next one?
No, I don't think so. I think that when we get the view of the 4 side by side, that will kind of show that equalized height a little bit better than the 4 Brady Bunch squares, right? But yeah, nicely covered.
Excellent. Okay. So if you just give us a few minutes or a few seconds here, we will switch over to our next video mode. So I'm going to pardon the disruption here as we
And we had a question in the chat too, and I don't know if it's something you want to speak to. It's about differentiation, right? And it's calling out the fact that Logi has had the same features on their bars in sight for a while now. What sets Jabra's implementation apart from the competition? And to be clear, before we dive into the answering that, it's much of what we're showcasing now in this instance is some of it is newer, some of it's been around for a while. Some of the way we're deciding on these things has been around for a while. We're not presenting all of it as new, rather than just kind of diving into the details of it. But yeah, it's a great question on differentiation. So any thoughts that either of you want to throw in there on that?
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. So the feature that we just showed you, which was on our PanaCast 50, we introduced that feature in August of 2022 now. So it's been in market for about 2 years. Since then, we've introduced more features, which is part of what we're going to show you right now, that shows the room even better, or at least differently, but even better. So that particular feature that we showed, the single stream one, as Parker mentioned, that is available even if you're just connected to a laptop directly to the camera, right? So the BYOD rooms get that feature as well as an MTR or a Zoom room. So that's something that I believe we do a little bit differently. All of the things like preserving the orientation of people in the room, that's also something that we, as we showed, do differently, I believe, than some of our competitors. But we really want to focus this on some of the newer video experiences that we've developed in the last 5-6 months. So we'll jump right into that. So you should now be seeing what we call our multi-stream dynamic composition. And that is a new feature that we launched 1 month ago now, I think.
I think 2.
2 months ago?
Yeah.
Okay, 2 months ago on our PanaCast 50.
Time flies.
This is a feature that works in Microsoft Teams rooms. So you would need an MTR in your room, an MTRW in the room, in order for this to work, connected to a PanaCast 50 and a Pro account. And what we're doing here is actually, instead of sending one video stream from the camera, we are sending teams 3 video streams simultaneously. So we're breaking up the room now into 3 streams, 1 stream for the person who is currently speaking, another stream for the person who has spoken just before that person, and 1 stream that preserves the context of the full room in a 180-degree video. In addition, and I believe you are all seeing this on your side, you are seeing names appear on these videos as well. Can I just get a quick thumbs up from Josh or someone if you are seeing indeed the name show up?
I was going to say, and especially a thumbs up from an external participant. So Josh is inside our organization, but if anybody who is not joining from your Jabra.com account can see my name, Parker Dunbar, and Victoria's name underneath her video tile in that multi-stream. I saw a thumbs up. I love it.
Excellent. Yeah, so these 2 features go hand in hand. So I'll talk about the names a little bit later, but in terms of the video streams, the same logic applies. If someone new started speaking in the room, it would replace Parker. And then if someone else started speaking, it would replace me. So the 2 most recent speakers always get displayed, and the full room view is always displayed as well, as long as there's more than 1 person in a room. So this is a feature we, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to jump in with a couple of questions as we're starting to get a couple stacking up there before we go on. One is in the Q&A from Frank, and he's asking, he's got some Crestron BX31 kits with the PanaCast 50 in them. Is this view available when the soundbar is connected to the Crestron Flex kit?
So for a Crestron Flex MTR, there is one requirement here for this multi-stream video mode, and that is that the connection between the camera and the MTR needs to be a USB 3.0 connection. So depending on your kit, if you have USB 2.0 coming from the camera out to the MTR, you would need to change that over to USB 3.0 for that connection. But this is not listed to only specific MTRs. So depending on what MTR you're bringing, as long as it's MTR on Windows and you've got that USB 3.0 connection, then you're going to be able to use this multi-stream feature. It does require some configuration in Jabra Direct and camera management side, and it's going to require, if you want these face name labels to appear, a lot of configuration on the Microsoft side, which, I mean, that's like a whole separate webinar.
Yeah.
But hopefully it speaks to some.
Another question there on the number of streams, which you already answered how many streams there were. But the other part of that question is any plans to expand out those number of streams?
For this particular device, the PanaCast 50, we are sticking to the 3 streams there. For other devices that we develop in the future, we are looking to support more streams. And we'll get to some of that in just a little bit as well.
Yeah.
And I saw a question from Brent in the chat, and he said the individual shots are not in the same orientation as the rim view, which is like, it's like the softball that we were hoping.
Yeah. So yeah, great observation, Brent. And that is actually something that I am trying to work with Microsoft on fixing. So what we do is give Microsoft the 3 streams. And then what they do is decide where to put them, how to lay them out, whether to show all 3 in that particular instance, or maybe just 1, depending on number of people in the room. So this is very much a Microsoft placement, and we are trying to work with them to match the orientation of those streams relative to the positioning of people in the room. So fingers crossed, and please feel free to talk to your Microsoft person as well, so that this can get prioritized on their side.
And I think too, if you haven't been in a lot of meetings where a camera in the room is using this multi-stream mode with Teams Room on Windows, one thing that surprised me the first time I saw it. So right now, when I look at this in a Teams client, what I see are 2 sort of square, speaker 1, speaker 2, and then I see the panoramic rectangle at the bottom there. But depending on whether or not the room is pinned, how many other participants are in the meeting, whether I've got the Teams client full screen or I've got it, only on a portion of the screen, if I have chat open, all those things, the layout can actually change. So instead of 2 side-by-side squares, I've seen 2 rectangles stacked on top of each other and then the pano below that. So this is one of those things where different devices or you're seeing different experiences. You're seeing a different experience because sometimes Microsoft or that UC partner is controlling the layout of those video streams, and sometimes Jabra is controlling the layout of those video streams.
Exactly right.
One other question there was, does that dynamic multi-stream require Teams Rooms on Windows and a Teams Rooms Pro license? Which this is a Teams Rooms on Windows. Android is not yet, I don't believe it is yet supporting multi-stream. So for Teams, right? Teams Rooms on Android does not yet support that. So while our device supports it, it is a Teams Rooms on Windows option only at the moment. And then the other part of that question is, does it require a Teams Pro license? I don't think there's any specific requirement there, but pretty much most people are, is or is there?
For multi-stream, you do not need the Pro license. For the person recognition, so the name tags that you see on Parker's and my video stream, I believe that part does require that Pro license.
Right. And again, in an organization where you're leveraging basic licenses instead of Pro licenses, you only get a handful of them anyway, right? So you'll likely be on a Pro license in most scenarios. Okay, I think we caught up on both Q&A and the chat. We can move along.
Cool. So I'll just spend a minute talking about the name tags part of this here. We touched on it a little bit, but so the name tags is a really cool feature. I have a lot of meetings with our headquarters office in Denmark, and a lot of times I talk to people who I don't really know, and just having their name tags there helps me know who they are. I can hover over them and see their profile, see what their title is, all of that. So it helps me know who I'm talking to. In addition, I think this is another feature along that the line of meeting equity. Everyone who's remote gets their own name tag, but people in a conference room up until this point haven't been able to get their own name tag. So I think this is another form of meeting equity that is really great to see. And this is, again, a joint collaboration between Microsoft and us to make this part work. So
I had a thought.
Yeah.
It was so close. It might have escaped me. It was a good thought.
I'm sure it was.
Nobody.
Like one of the best ones of the day.
Yes,
And,
there we go. All right, I remembered my thought. So again, for people who haven't had a lot of meetings where a remote room has been using this multi-stream feature, another thing you can do individually for you in your Teams client, you can come to our room, you hover over it with your mouse, you right click on any of our chunk of video feeds, and you can choose hide panorama. So if you didn't want to see that view of the room, you could just hide or show that panoramic view, so that if you want the context or if you want a little extra real estate devoted to the speakers there in the room, that's a feature enabled on the client side. You hiding that panorama does not affect the panorama for anybody else. It just gives you a little bit more control over the experience in the meeting room.
I just learned something. Thanks, Parker. That's amazing.
Hey, woohoo. This is going in my performance review for the year.
Yeah, no kidding. There you go. And there have been a couple comments about the fact that the name tags requires you to enroll your face, right? So that is, if you're not monitoring the chat, just to make that very clear, these name tags only show up when you've taken the time to go in and opt into the experience of enrolling your face via pictures being taken by your webcam, preferably a PanaCast 20, in your Microsoft Teams client individually. So within an organization, you may have some people that have it and some that don't. And that, you'd see participant 1 or 2 or whoever instead of the person's name. So just to be clear, if you didn't see that in the chat.
And if you are a techie IT admin person who's trying to enable this experience for an organization, right now, the face enrollment is defaulted to off. So you have to go in and you have to actually turn on the ability for user profiles to go through face enrollment. In the future, Microsoft has said they're going to default that feature to on, which just defaults the ability for a user to enroll to on. So if you want, you can go in and you can, preserve that off default, but down the road, Microsoft has said to kind of simplify the rollout of things, make it easier for people who want to try this out, they'll be changing to that default on. So another tech tidbit for you.
Great. I think we covered multi-stream
I think
and
so.
The people recognition. So at this point, we're going to switch over to our other camera, our PanaCast 50 video bar system, VBS. So we will have another, hopefully under 30 seconds of downtime here as we make that switch. So bear with us, please.
And I'll comment on another chat item in there while you're doing that. And that's Doc put a comment in there about if I'm the manager on a call with my team, I may want to override so that I could see everyone. And just to be clear, Microsoft's made the decision for privacy reasons that you would not be able to force people to enroll their faces. They have to choose on an individual level. And the organization may take a stance of we're going to require our employees to do that. Now, depending on the country you're in and all that, there's going to come different legalities that come into play there and privacy concerns, right? But from a controlling perspective, there's not a way to force that on the team side. It's an opt-in mechanism.
All right, so I did promise at one point that we would show you what you're going to see before you see it. So we're going to switch gears now, and instead of looking at experiences from the PanaCast 50 USB peripheral device, we're going to be looking at experiences from the PanaCast 50 VBS, the Android video bar. This is running our latest Value Pack 1.1 firmware, which is just released into the market, and you're going to see some Zoom experiences. And since we're already all here together in this Teams call, and these experiences are not the kind of things that are necessarily going to play very nicely through a direct guest join, we're going to watch this on a device that's joining a different meeting where that device is watching a room that's using these experiences. So because all of these video experiences really are for the benefit of the people who are joining the meeting remotely, you're going to be seeing what that remote participant's user experience looks like. But consistency-wise, it's still going to be this room right here. So I'm going to drag my little meeting over here and start sharing.
Is this akin to like an out-of-body experience or in the movie Inception or something like that?
I think so. Like, how many times can we do this same thing with one experience? Actually, I'm going to change the way I'm sharing, which is hopefully going to give you kind of a smoother video image to what I was originally.
So for the context there, where Parker is a bit delayed on the video compared to his voice, again, that's because we're not viewing him directly in this meeting. We're viewing him in another meeting while he's sharing his desktop. So that's why you get the little delay and latency there.
Yep. And we wanted you to be able to kind of see things clearly and hear things really clearly. We wanted to try to minimize confusion from having two videos of different ways of looking at the meeting room. So here I am, I'm in a Zoom meeting, and the room is using our updated version of dynamic composition that's available now in that value pack 1.1 for Teams rooms and Zoom rooms. And so you can see the difference here versus what we saw earlier on the PanaCast 50 is that we are providing that contextual view of the rest of the room there at the bottom, and then we've got side-by-side speakers on the top. This is a single stream experience, and that's why I left my lovely little second self view here, just so that you could get that comparison. When you are joining a meeting and the room is doing this, then you're going to see only this much space allocated in that Zoom client for that single stream view of the room. I'm going to go ahead and hide the self view so that we can see what's going on a little bit better and talk through some of these features a little bit more. So maybe Victoria, I'll pass over to you to talk about our new dynamic composition.
Yeah, so when we first started this call, what you saw was the dynamic composition that we launched a couple of years ago on the PanaCast 50 USB peripheral. It was a 2x2 grid. We've recently released this new version for our PanaCast 50 video bar system, where we've incorporated a lot of feedback that we received from the market, which was along the lines of, it's great to see 4 zoomed in faces, but what if there are more people in the room, right? What if those people don't talk? Sometimes I don't even know that there are more people in the room if there are just 4 really chatty people. So what we've done is still show a close-up of the 4 most recent speakers in the room, as well as show the full room context at the bottom. And that full room context will adjust depending on where people are sitting. So for instance, if I move and stand all the way at the 180-degree mark here, at some point the camera will quickly adjust and show me as well. And that room view zoomed out a little bit to show me. I'm going to go sit back down where I was, and the camera will adjust again. So as with the previous logic that we talked about, if there was a new speaker that came into the room, we would quickly adjust and show them in the individual views at the top.
And as Victoria had said, or as we kind of talked through on the PanaCast 50 dynamic composition at the very beginning, again, we're sort of normalizing people size in each of those feeds. So just because I'm closer to the camera, even though I appear larger in that panoramic view at the bottom, in that tiled view at the top of the different active speakers, we all appear to be about the same size. And as you saw when Victoria went from a seated position where she was a couple feet away from the camera to right up against the extreme of the video's field of view, you didn't see any kind of change or skew or slant in her kind of shoulders as she went from one position to another. So it's one of those things where I think, for me at least, once you notice it, you start noticing it all the time when someone moves in a different spot in the room and all of a sudden they've gone from sort of one shirt size to another shirt size. But because we have these multiple images that we're bringing together, we're able to get people in their true to life aspect ratio from each of those different sensors.
Yeah. Also important to note, right, like we're showing you the video from just the room. If there were 10 other people dialed into this call, this video would get even smaller. So why are we doing this? It's because we want to show people, show their facial expression, show whether they look confused, whether they're following along, whether they look sleepy and might need a break, to show all of that stuff way better than we can if we were just doing it with just one full room view. So what type of rooms is this really great for, right? So you can see in this room, Parker is sitting pretty close to the camera, and at the bottom, he's almost bigger than the than the version of him at the top, right? However, take a signature style where everyone is sitting about the same distance from the camera. That's a really great use of this particular video mode, because now you get the context of the full room at the bottom, but then a really zoomed in version of everyone at the top, more so than you do now, where Parker is sitting a bit closer than someone else. So
And
hopefully
then there
that.
was a point actually made by Scott in the chat, kind of along these lines, right? Can the size of the room view be changed? It's confusing to see people twice on the screen, especially when they're about the same size. Which, as we see now, we see Parker looks almost exactly the same size as he is in those two places. But to the point Victoria is making, in a lot of the rooms where you may want to utilize this mode, you're not going to have the setup like we have in this room where the table is right up against the wall and the speakers are right up against the wall as Parker is. So you'll have differences in sizing that are a little more apparent in those typical use cases. But anything else to add in terms of can it be changed, or can you manage that panoramic view at the bottom?
So yeah, right now we don't offer any way to change that. It is something that we can definitely look at for the future. One of the really cool things about this device is that you can change the video mode that the camera is using on the fly. So for instance, if we said, hey, we don't want to show this view, we just want to show, let's say, the full room view, Parker can just, on the touch controller, with the touch of a button in real time, go ahead and change that. So if that view isn't the best view for that meeting, maybe it's a round table kind of meeting, everyone's giving status updates, you just want to see the full room, maybe this is the right view. And you can change that on the fly, which is really cool. The next video mode that we'll talk about is actually our multi-stream, which breaks up the room even further. So while you're deciding what is best for your rooms, your organization, the types of meetings that are happening, we'd absolutely encourage you to try all of these different modes and see what works best. Some tables, like this table that we have here in the room, is right up against the front of the room, against the wall. Parker's hand is literally touching the wall in front of him right now where the camera is mounted. But however, not everyone has the table right up against the wall, right? So if our table started where I am, you might choose a different video mode than previously. So totally encourage you to try out all of these different modes and see what works best for your orgs.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's like a great point, and I'm glad that was kind of like brought up organically and as a takeaway. Not every video mode is going to be right for every room in every space, and certainly, I think in this intelligent zoom, I'm probably about the same amount of pixel real estate that I was before. However, if you think about Will and how much space he's getting in terms of density on the screen, it's very, very low compared to what you saw a minute ago. So maybe this is a kind of room where either intelligent zoom or active speaker would be more appropriate as a view. But as Victoria said, we're going to go ahead and switch over to the multi-stream mode that was released in value.
As you're switching that, there's a question in there about this particular experience that we were just going over. And the question was, any plan to offer this VBS experience in Windows? Which I believe we're referring to, having up to 4 different images with that along the bottom. And I think, Victoria, you kind of already answered that earlier, right? And that's that we for multi-stream, it's just going to be those 2 streams and the one on the bottom. But for this particular experience, that question is, it's almost like that on the Windows side, but not quite.
Sorry, when you say if we can offer the VBS camera experience in Windows, do you mean on a PanaCast 50, or do you mean in a VBS running on an MTR-A? Which, can you clarify the question?
Yeah, Scott, feel free to either put it in the chat or we can unmute you here as well if you would like to.
Got it. Okay. I think there was just clarification there.
Yep.
So the question is whether we could bring this experience that you're looking at right now over to a PanaCast 50 that is connected to an MTRW. So Currently, no. The reason why is just because of some technical limitations. These are two very different products. They look very, very similar to each other, but the Android bar is quite different in terms of functionality to the PanaCast 50, which has now been on the market for several years. So in terms of just technical capabilities, these devices are capable of different things. Um, but definitely keep these kinds of comments, suggestions, feedback coming so we can explore further if there is a way for us to bring these new features or new layouts to older products as well.
Yep. All right. So I promised a little primer. So what I want to do is I want to bring the self view back for just a moment, even though it's not me. I thought it would be nice if you had a picture of someone else. So we have stock photo guy. So we're going to switch from this single stream dynamic composition to a multi-stream dynamic composition in just a second here.
Yeah, and just before you do that, there is a question whether this particular VBS video bar system experience that we're showing right now is available even in a Teams meeting. So yes, it is. The multi-stream that we're going to go to next is not. However, this experience you can use today if you are using PanaCast 50 VBS in a Microsoft Teams room running on Android.
Yeah. All right, so I'm coming over to my controller here in the room. I'm switching in Zoom to their multi-stream mode. And first, you see a stream populate that's just that view of the room. But now we're seeing our individual people views, or sometimes it'll be a grouped person view, depending on where people are and how best they can be framed. But you see now that we have the single view of the whole room, and then we have 5 streams that are the individual people who are here in the meeting. And I kept that self view on just to help kind of emphasize that these are now multiple separate video streams that are being delivered to Zoom. Whereas before, what we were looking at was a single video stream that was going to occupy one space. So if 2 more people join this call, we would just end up with that grid of 9 squares. Versus if 2 people joined that call before, when we were in a single stream meeting, we would end up with a grid of 4 squares within the Zoom client side. So although this can sometimes look similar on smaller scales, as more and more people join the room, the difference becomes quite apparent.
That's right.
And I will call out that this is the most Smart Gallery streams available on the market. And it gets even better than that. So, but I'll let you get to that.
Yeah, that's right. So Zoom today can take in 6 simultaneous video streams. And as you can see here, what Zoom does is they show the room name. So ZR Sequoia is our meeting room name. And then they label each subsequent stream from that meeting room with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we tell Zoom who the active speaker is. So right now I am speaking, so I get the nice green highlight on myself. Few things to note here, in keeping with our former experiences that we talked about as well. We are preserving the orientation of people in the room. So that's why Parker is next to Amy, is next to Will, is next to Ron, is next to myself. So that context is preserved. We are also trying our best to normalize people heights and face sizes so that you get a uniform experience on the far end. So basically, one person's face doesn't occupy 90% of the screen versus someone else just taking up 20% of the screen. So a nice consistent experience here is what we're going for. So what happens if there are more people than the number shown? So right now, 5 people in the room, there are 5 additional video streams for those 5 people. If there were 10 people in the room, what would happen? So we start doing what we call compositing, or breaking up each of these 5 streams into smaller streams. So within Parker's stream, for instance, there would be a nice vertical black line there to show another person next to him, and so on and so forth for all the additional streams. And even in that view, you would get the orientation of people in the room matched along with the grouping of those streams. Hopefully that made sense.
That goes up to 20, right? We can squeeze up to 20 people into these 5 individual streams.
Yeah.
And again, this is far more flexibility and control with this iteration of Smart Gallery than you've got anywhere else in the market at this stage. So it's a pretty powerful feature.
Yeah, and the whole rationale there, right? Like why show 20 people in these five streams versus just show the five most recent speakers? So Zoom's take on this is a bit different than Microsoft, where Zoom says everyone in the room should be shown equally. It's not about who has spoken the most recently. It's about showing everyone the same way, again, to deliver on that true meeting equity, so that you can really see those nonverbal communication cues, all of that really well. Now, it's highly unlikely that you would put a PanaCast 50 VBS in a room that has 20 people. But if you do, we do support it. So what happens if there is now a 21st person that is in the room? So we don't try to cram even more people in there, but that 21st person, once they speak, will replace someone else in the room. So they will get their share of the video stream as well.
I'm excited. We actually have someone that's going to come back next month in costume, so I won't be by myself. Yes.
Excellent.
Good stuff.
Just one more thing to add here before I forget. So as you can imagine, having multiple streams, 6 streams coming from one room could be, a bit of a bandwidth hog. So IT admins do in ZDM have the ability to go say, hey, instead of 6, I really want just 4 streams. Maybe I have 15 meeting rooms on the same floor, all sharing the same bandwidth, and maybe that's, creating some issues. So you do have the ability to configure that.
And when we talk about bandwidth consumption, not only are these 6 streams, but the people streams, the 5 of those are up to 720p resolution per stream. So this is a pretty significant amount of data that you're able to push through in that meeting room. And those people streams are able to be fairly detailed. So you've got an inherent trade-off between the quality that you're able to show at those high resolution, high number of streams and the amount of data that you're going to consume and push out to everyone else who's joining the meeting. So it's great to have some controls on the admin side to be able to decide, do you want to sort of give the most perfect, pristine possible representation of the room, or do you want to focus on, finding a balance somewhere in the middle?
And just so we're explicit on which platforms support this and which don't. So this multi-stream experience is supported on Zoom. It is not supported on Teams, and the reason why is because Teams rooms on Android does not yet support the multi-stream experience. So once they release support for that, we will of course jump on that and release our own support for Teams rooms on Android.
You're also seeing sort of the differences in the way that 2 different UC platform providers choose to handle laying out multiple video streams. So Zoom has just kind of sequentially laid out each view as if, they're kind of using the numbering for context. They're going to keep them in a running row as you go through and have more and more people in the room, versus Microsoft has a layout where they're really creating more of like an overarching square that might get a little bit more real estate than just a single person joining the meeting and associating all of those things together. So 2 ways that 2 different pieces of hardware give different experiences, but it's not just the hardware, it's also that UC platform side that's making those changes.
And there is a question about, can the individual streams be renamed? And Zoom did just come out and announce smart tags, I believe is the name is of the. So they are getting to that point as well, where you will soon in these experiences start being able to see if people again have opted their face in, right? You'll be able to see their own name there. But I don't believe there's any other control on the Zoom client side to manually change those names. Yeah.
That is correct.
All right. Well, let me stop sharing here and we'll turn our video back on here in the room. And that way we can kind of wrap up for some Q&A, go over anything else people have questions-wise. What's coming in the chat while I've been closing all the chat messages really fast since I'm screen sharing.
We had one more question just pop in, and is a pro license a subscription or a one-time for the device? Now, I believe this is referring to Teams Rooms Pro. And so for that team side, it's going to be a subscription, right? Microsoft has very much shifted to a subscription model for all these licenses. So you will pay a monthly fee for each room. You assign the license once to it, and then you're off to the races, but it will be reoccurring. So, and I don't know how to answer the question on the Zoom side. I'm not even sure if that's what the name would be there, but
Zoom has their rooms license, which I think is $49 a room a month. And so you would just need to have that room license, which is a subscription model.
Yeah. Perfect. And I don't think we have any other, and then we're going to check the Q&A just to make sure. Nope, no other ones have come in there. Okay. And back over to our chat. Have another pop in. You can just share application versus sharing the whole screen.
Yes, the reason that I was sharing the whole screen, like fun little tidbits, I really wanted you to have as little latency as possible. So I was doing HDMI ingest into a Teams room for you to watch. Certainly if I had been sharing from my client and just sharing the Zoom client, that would have avoided lots of pop-ups and other things you needed to see. But maybe there would have been a little trade-off there in terms of the video looking jerky. And we want it to be as smooth as we can be.
Yeah, but it is a good thing to recall out that the lag was due to the way we were sharing. I won't call her out, but one of our own messaged me on the side to say, is Parker video lagging for you too? And I'm like, yeah, we said that at the beginning, but sometimes we multitask during meetings. So if you missed that clarification, it was the lagginess there was due to the fact that a meeting, not in this meeting, was being shared into this meeting. And so it got a little tricky. Yes, from another device.
And I think too, like to the same point, we had thought about, should we do this demo from different rooms and go to more ideal types of rooms for these different video modes? And we thought it's a lot to wrap our head around to talk about 2 different products and 4 different video experiences, to also have you then have to look at 2 to 4 different rooms, as we showed. We thought it might be a little easier if we at least stayed consistent on where we were sitting and who was there in the room.
Yeah. All right, our questions, it looks like they have slowed right on down, and we're coming right up to the end of this thing. Great conversation, though. Great questions, great digging into that. And of course, please reach out to us after the fact if more questions do pop up, and we'd be happy to get those things answered. But any final words, Parker or Victoria, before we jump into the end of this?
No, just thank you for the engagement and for your interest in this stuff. It's super cool to share all of the inside stuff that happens in the cameras with you guys.
It is. It's awesome. Very good engagement today. And again, reminder, next month, we're going to be talking about the VBS, the Android bar, and we're going to be talking about all the new features to it. Some of the things we talked about today, there's a lot more that the VBS has had lately. It is really, it's had an avalanche of innovation, as I referred to it the other day on a video. A lot has happened there. So we're going to get all caught up next month on what all that is. In costume. We're going to be in costume. You must be in costume to be eligible to win the giveaway next month, because best costume wins. And though we are ineligible on the Jabra side, I still encourage all of my fellow Jabra people to come wearing costumes like I will be, because it's going to be fun. So that's it for today. Again, there is a survey link in the chat. So if you did not, if you have some feedback, some thoughts, want to hear a specific session, please go there, fill it out, let us know how it was and how we can make this thing better into the future. And again, jabra.com/technically speaking, please bookmark, stay up to date. Keep an eye on those emails. We'll be reaching out with the winner of today's giveaway. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.